How's it going, guys? My name is Jimmy Champane, and thank you so much for clicking on my review of Pet Sematary. I went to a screening last night, which was definitely the weirdest and most bizarre press screening I've ever been to. They gave me this bottle of dirt that says "Sometimes Dead is Better" on it, and it was also hosted by a radio station, and they had a screaming contest to give away Universal Studios tickets. But I love the movie overall. I've been looking forward to this movie for a really long time, thanks to the two directors behind it, Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer. I'm a really big fan of them because they worked on a movie together a few years ago called Starry Eyes. The reason I'm bringing this up is because I like Starry Eyes thanks to the fact that it's a horror movie that relies on a building sense of dread and tension that pays off big time in the third act, and that's exactly what Pet Sematary is. The story follows the Creed family, who are moving from Boston, Massachusetts all the way up to Ludlow, Maine. They're basically going from the big city to the middle of nowhere. The reason they're moving is so they can slow down and have some time with their kids while they're still kids. Jason Clarke's Louis Creed takes a job at a local university hospital rather than the hospital in the middle of Boston he was working at, because he's trying to have patients who have a sprained knee or strep throat. He doesn't want to see gunshot wounds in the middle of the night, and that's kind of understandable. The big problem for the Creed family is that from the very second they arrive in Maine, everything starts to go wrong. Now, I'm going to be real with you guys, this might surprise you based on the title, but the thing that's basically at the center of all their problems is a cemetery in their backyard where anything you bury there comes back to life, but with a mean-spirited edge. Oh, and on Louis Creed's first day of work, the very first patient he has is a 20-year-old college student who gets hit by a car and he's gored down the entire left side of his body and he dies right there on the table. Pretty bad first day because it's exactly what he was trying to get away from. I feel bad for the guy. What I was really impressed with here is the fact that I was able to pull 99% of that information out of the movie just from realistic conversations between Louis, his wife Rachel, and their neighbor Judd. It's a really well-written movie and it's equally well acted. Everyone is really doing a good job of pulling their weight here. Another thing I really liked about Pet Sematary is that it digs deep into the themes of the novel, like grief and guilt. It really made me ask myself some tough questions about when I'm supposed to stop feeling sorry for someone who had something terrible happen to them and realize that that event changed them for the worse, and I really think that's a cool thing. We're gonna start getting into some very minor spoilers right now, but if you know the story of Pet Sematary, they shouldn't bother you. I just felt like I should warn you before I jumped in. If you've seen the second trailer for this movie, you know that instead of having Gage die out on the highway, the directors chose to change it up and have Ellie die so she can come back to life. There's a few reasons for it, but the big one is that the older a kid is, the better they'll be at acting, and generally speaking, kids aren't very good actors, so I'll really take what I can get there, and Jatae Lawrence does an incredible job as Ellie. She actually does get a lot of the spotlight in the second and third acts. She handles it so well, so I think they made a really smart decision by making sure she was the main focus of the movie rather than Gage. Focusing on fellow 9-year-old Ellie also gave her an opportunity to have conversations with her dad that Gage never could. She straight up asks her dad early in the movie what happens after we die, and since her dad is a doctor, he straight up tells her, when your metabolic clock ticks its last tock, you die and that's it. You go into the ground and there's no afterlife. And seeing him tell a 9-year-old kid that, it's something you wrestle with. You're like, okay, he's being real with his kid, he's trusting her, but then you have to think about the fact that she's 9 years old and now she has to be scared of death the rest of her life, and she spends the vast majority of the movie being scared of death, which is good because that's exactly what happens to her. And the real twist of the knife in this movie is that once Ellie's dead, you can basically see that conversation where he tells her there's nothing after floating in front of his eyes. He is extremely grief-ridden, and you can see that in Jason Clarke's performance. He did an awesome job. And it kind of makes you understand why he's gonna go and dig her up and bury her in the Pet Cemetery, but it's also just kind of funny to see someone who's so objective and matter-of-fact fold like a deck of cards when the worst thing that could happen to him happens to him. It's a really good character study. Another big change that might be controversial between this movie and the 1989 one is that at the center of the story causing all of these bad things to happen and causing these bodies to come back to life is a Wendigo out in the woods. Unfortunately, you don't actually see the Wendigo in this movie outside of a drawing that Judd shows Louis when he's explaining how the Little God Swamp works, but when they do go out into the woods to bury Church one night, you hear it crashing around in the trees and roaring, which is just enough to let you know it's there, and that justifies a lot of the things that happen in the second and third act. I talked about this more in a video I posted on Sunday, but it also helps you understand why a kind-hearted man like Judd would even take Louis out to this burial ground when he knows all of the bad things that can happen there. The Wendigo is influencing his thoughts and making him think it's a good idea. One big change I didn't like is that in this movie, Zelda gets her screen time cut down massively from the 1989 movie. She's a really good character, and I know a lot of people were nervous when a younger actress was cast as her, myself included, but they really did some awesome prosthetic work on her, and in the few scenes she has, she does really make it scary. I know that they probably didn't think they could top the 1989 movie or even match it, which is fair since that was done so well, but again, again, they did a good job here and I would have liked to see more of it, because that's really the only thing torturing Rachel throughout the entire movie, and she gets far less scare sequences than her husband Louis does. There's also just a general sense of cheapness in the movie that's still bothering me a day later. It was shot in Quebec instead of on location in Maine, and that's a pretty good stand-in for Maine, but there's also a scene later in the movie that takes place on Halloween, and the only change in the scenery at all is that they put up decorations, which was super disappointing. I know this might seem like a nitpick, but to me, as someone who's been out to New England a few times in the fall and really loves it and wants to live there one day, if you're gonna have your movie set in Maine and you're gonna show Halloween, you better have those fall leaves. You can't have some green foliage in the background. It just doesn't fucking work, and it took me straight out of the movie. And on top of that, one of the most important scenes in the movie is extremely lacking visually. It's when Judd takes Louis out into the Pet Sematary so he can bury Church there. I guess the visual flair it provides is nice, but the rest of this movie, like the other 99% of this movie, was done practically, so having that one moment of CGI really stuck out and dragged the movie down. But at the end of the day, Pet Sematary is an awesome horror remake that I feel like totally justifies its existence by both changing things in the novel and the 1989 movie it's being remade from. You've got two awesome directors, an incredible script, and really good performances all the way throughout the movie that all combine to make a remake that's better than the original movie, and how often does that happen? I know coming off of Us, Pet Sematary might not seem like the most inspired choice of movie to go see this weekend, but if you're a horror fan, I really think you should check it out. It made me feel a real sense of dread and a real sense of actual fear for death coming out of a movie, which is something that a horror movie has never really done before, even the original Pet Sematary, and for that reason alone, I think it's worth checking out, even coming off of something as original as Us. So that's my review of Pet Sematary. If you go check it out, let me know what you think down in the comments below, and also let me know what your favorite part was, and if you think I was right on a lot of my review. You can also disagree with me. I'd love to hear from you either way. And also, if you're not subscribed already, I'd really appreciate it if you did. Anyway, guys, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.